This map shows China's hilarious stereotypes of Europe. According to Chinese web users, we have Russia, who likes to fight, Finland, who has good English. They do, but I'm surprised that that's the #1 thing. Sweden, what? What? China still seems to be respecting the UK a lot. I remember reviewing a similar map to Europe, but it was from Japan. This said the same thing for Germany, though. Is that true, Poland? Really? Crazy that even China knows this about Switzerland. I think everyone around the world has been asking this for a couple centuries now. It's Portugal. I still don't have the answer. They tried. They tried a couple times. Jeez, man, I'm sorry. It's crazy how often some of these opinions are shared by nations around the world. I'm saying that because I remember Japan also saying something similar. Okay, there's that still for Greece. I've heard this before about Ukraine. Netherlands, tall. But obviously there's a couple more things in here that I can't even talk about. Well, thanks for sharing, China. Different percentages of populations that speak fluent English. At the very bottom of the list, we have Brazil at 5%. That is shockingly low. How is it that low? I mean, maybe I'm taking for granted the fact that so many European nations teach English as a second language, but I just figured at the very least there would be a lot of outsiders that maybe aren't native to Brazil that would still be able to speak English. Mexico's apparently even lower, but I feel like I encountered a lot of English speakers in Mexico. There's then Russia at 12% and Turkey at 18%. We have India at 20%. For some reason, I thought that number would be higher, just considering the whole British Raj thing and British colonization. 20% is still a lot of speakers out of the billion people that live here, though. Actually, a big reason why English might be the #1 most popular language on Earth could be India, because I believe this data includes English as a second language as well, usually. Always knew Spain had very low English speaking rates. South Africa is doing better than India at 31%, former British colonies. Surprisingly, France has more English speakers than Italy. I really thought if anyone didn't respect English, it would be the French. I guess, unfortunately, this tweet was probably not made in France, I guess. Greece is at a perfect 50%. Germany's at 56%. We have the Philippines at 58%. I knew that number would be pretty high. Nigeria, also a former British colony. They're doing great at 60%. Finland, who the Chinese think have really good English, is at 70%. Pretty great. Canada's only at 8%. Oh, that's right, Quebec. Totally forgot about that. There's Sweden, Norway, Australia, and then there's the USA, who's only sitting at 95%. Remember, the US does not actually have an official language, though. About 5% of the 331 million people living in the US not speaking English. I think that actually does check out. That makes sense to me. It is, however, funny to see Singapore beating us out on this list. I think I'm a little bit more surprised that the UK is only at 98.3%. Ireland's beating them. And then finally, there's the tiny nation of Gibraltar, which they aren't actually even labeled on this language map. It's still impressive that they went to every single citizen and they all speak English fluently. I mean, that's what we're supposed to believe, right? I mean, if anyone's going to be able to do it, it's going to be a small island nation with only about 32,000 people living in it. Places ending with OWO or OW with a tilde on top in Poland. I'm assuming this is a tilde or something like that. So all the cities, towns, and villages ending in OO are usually in the north of Poland. Meanwhile, those ending in O are usually in the south. And this is a very fascinating map if you know the history of Poland, because there's a reason for this, obviously. There's a lot more factors that go into it. Remember, Germany did look like this 100 years ago, or a little bit over 100 years ago. And now a lot of this stuff belongs to Poland. This also really reminds me of certain Polish election maps. Certain parts of the country vote very differently than others, which, I mean, technically that's every country does that. I don't know what I'm talking about, but you could see the line. Again, there's definitely more than just those factors that go into this. Great athletes versus average animals. So representing humans in the 100-meter dash, we have Usain Bolt here, who's running at an almost 28 miles per hour. Obviously, that is incredible, but still no match for the domestic house cat, who apparently runs at 30. There's also the warthog that's just as fast. No wonder those things can be so dangerous. And then the southern dart butterfly at 37 miles an hour. A butterfly can fly? What? But of course, nobody is no match for this falcon. I mean, that's not even fair. They can fly. How about the 100-meter freestyle swim? Eamon Sullivan did this at 4.7 miles an hour, which was actually faster than an emperor penguin, but not quite as fast as a blue whale. But you know what? The blue whale wasn't going that much faster. It was a close race. That is crazy. The fastest swimmer can almost compete against a blue whale. Of course, no one could go as fast as the sailfish, though. So already I'm noticing humans penguins are a little bit closer with competing with the animal kingdom in the ocean than on land. Finally, there's the long jump. This dude jumped 30 feet. Oh my goodness. I remember doing track in high school. I think my most ever was only like 14 feet. So this guy can almost jump as far as an impala, as well as a puma, but nothing is as good as the snow leopard at 50 feet. Again, this dude's not too far behind though. There's other competitions like free diving and high jump. Pit bulls can jump 14 feet. Another reason not to mess with them. Modern day countries that had an empire of at least 1 million square kilometers. So let's just get the biggest country by surface area on Earth out of the way. Of course, Russia's on the list, as well as China. They've always been pretty big. Then there's Mongolia. I think we all know why they were on the list. There's also Japan, who got really big in WW2, unfortunately for a lot of surrounding countries. There's Indonesia, which made the list, as well as Cambodia, which actually probably did this because of the Khmer Empire. They got very thick there a few centuries ago. There's India and Afghanistan. Surprised about this. Persia, of course, got really giant in history. I wonder what exactly defines this. Is it where the capital of the empire was placed? That's gotta be the way it happened. There's Ukraine and of course Poland. Poland also helps out Lithuania there. It was Poland, Lithuania. Denmark got pretty big because of the Vikings. Not even to talk about Germany. Then we're getting into the colonization nations, of course, like Spain, Portugal, France. Italy colonized, but I'm thinking like Rome on the list. Greece got big. Turkey was the Ottomans. Mali Empire definitely was nothing to be scoffed at. Cool to see Ethiopia make the list. Of course, the British Empire was the biggest in history ever. They had over 25 million kilometers. Then there's only 3 in America: Brazil, Peru, and I'm thinking this is the Inca, and of course Mexico, who was giant. USA not here though, but I'm thinking that's because the USA never technically had an empire. That was not like their official name. I feel like Sweden should have made this list. The retirement age for nations in the G20. This is specifically for men, even though we have a lady right here. So the youngest on the list is Indonesia at 58 years old. Dang, that's nice and early. I'm trying to be like Indonesia. Then there's a bunch of places that are sitting at 60: Turkey, South Korea, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, India, and China. There's Russia at a very oddly specific 61.5. France is 62. They do not like when you try to increase that. Though Japan has very tough work culture, they are retiring a year earlier than we are in the US. Not that that makes up for it, but I'm just saying. But the US is actually not here in 65. The European Union, Switzerland, Mexico, Canada, and Brazil are. The US is actually ahead of Germany, who's only at 65.8. I remember reading that the UK was at 66. The US on average is actually at 66.3. They're in 4th place, but in 3rd is Australia, then the Netherlands, and then Italy. Didn't think Italy would wait so long. 67 feet to land on top. And I actually think that some of this information is not up to date. Finally, someone has done it. Travel advisory maps from a lot more countries than just like the US and France. I've seen the US and France and maybe the Canada version a couple times, but we've got so much more here. These maps are so hilarious because a lot of the times they do not make any sense. It's all just like a political thing. It's broken down into 3 categories: blue, which are safe countries; orange, which is be careful; and then red, recommended not to go. So the US one does need to be updated. I've seen several times before. A lot of Western Europe is considered in the cautionary area, and that's because of COVID. So this is like 2 years out of date. I remember specifically that Mexico is actually broken down by state. So that's probably why this map just put them in the cautionary category. I didn't realize there were so many South American countries that were red though. I thought Peru was fine. Now let's compare that map to China's. China's travel advisory seems to be a lot more chill, that's for sure. Except for North Korea. I mean, even with North Korea, like it's not red. It's probably definitely a lot easier to go to that country if you're from China than if you're from the US. China says be careful in Ukraine, but Russia's cool. Be careful in a couple of these neighboring countries. They're a lot more relaxed in Africa. Why is the UK cautionary? Oh, again, it might be a political thing because so is the US. Honestly, though, like if you were to ask me, there are certain parts of the US where I would also recommend people be extremely careful. China's chill with Mexico, Cuba, Brazil, a lot of countries that was labeled cautionary or red in the US. Here's the travel advisory for Russia, and this one actually might be the most interesting one I've ever seen. So the Russian government is pretty much just chill with Belarus in all of the European continent. Bosnia and Serbia are alright, but everyone else, no. You can go to Syria though, but be careful. Of course, places like Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan labeled red. Any like Western ally, of course. Out of all the Latin American countries, Argentina, Panama, Nicaragua, and Cuba. It's an interesting bunch there. Of course, this continent, a very mixed bag. Canada's is not going to be that interesting, but I do think it's kind of funny that they have cautionary for Belgium, France, and the UK. Could it be the same sort of like COVID thing? Canada recommends no travel to Venezuela and Haiti. Everything else seems kind of normal here. Germany's a lot more careful where they're recommending their people can go. There does seem to be a lot of red on this map. A lot of cautionary for neighboring countries like France, though. And Czechia. Whoa, what's Sweden? Again, all these maps could be like, who knows what year they're coming from. I'm sure they're all coming from different years. It's been a while since they've been updated. Germany looks like they have like slight warnings for maybe parts of China. They're only cool with 2 places in Africa, and they're only cool with Ecuador. I do find it really interesting interesting to see like which countries they label as blue. I wonder what the diplomatic relationship between Germany and Ecuador is. Finally, there's South Korea. South Korea looks like they're allowing their citizens to go to China, but certain parts of China are in red. Interesting that they're cool with Japan, at least on the surface, but maybe not underneath that. Not cool with Mongolia, interestingly enough. You pretty much go to anywhere in Europe, except they do have cautionary areas with Turkey, Romania, and Poland. They're cool with Uruguay. I feel like South Korea has a lot of blue on this map. And maybe some of them are stripes, to be fair. China actually has a lot of the world labeled blue. Just like, go for it. U.S. metro markets with the most vacant offices. Vacant office space has become a really big deal ever since the lockdowns. A lot of people work from home now. Starting the list with New York City, which actually isn't quite as bad as some of these other places. There's also Columbus, Ohio, Phoenix, Arizona. Oh, there's New York City. Oh, New York City's broken down into different areas. Salt Lake, Seattle, Austin, New York City, Midtown South, but the biggest on the list is San Francisco, which I've heard they have a problem with this, but looking at this infographic, it shows just how bad it actually is compared to other places. This is the expected number of obsolete office space by 2030 in the US. Well, that can't be good. Big thanks to my patrons. Destiny, 9,000. Drew needs to pay his taxes.
Why am I doing
this?
John
JohnDenver,
I'm the kidnapper.
Jack
I
Traven's annoying friends.
Ransom. This channel's not run by
Caleb,
Australia
is real. I am not a paid actor.
LuxembourgLover,
Patrick
RyeThePie,
subscribe to
The
Mexican
GoodOldRyah,
716.
Twickenhamster.
Become a patron by checking the description down below.